The crystal clinked before the sting hit. I was halfway through a toast, Marlena's voice echoing across the marble ballroom when my phone buzzed. I glanced down out of habit, thinking maybe it was a friend running late or a calendar reminder I'd forgotten to dismiss. Instead, it read, "You're fired. We need fresh blood." No greeting, no signature, just that. I stared at it like the letters might rearrange themselves into something human. Around me, applause swelled. Marlena grinned beneath a cascade of lights, holding court like a queen who'd never bled. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass. The wine turned metallic on my tongue. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I just stood there, glass still raised every inch of me, suddenly aware of the weight of my dress, the heat under my collarbones, the impossible stillness in my spine. My hand didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. Across the room, Beatrix Roan caught my eye. She wasn't laughing, wasn't smiling, just watching, head slightly tilted as if she already knew. I stepped off the platform and crossed the floor heels silent on imported tile. Conversations parted around me like smoke. Some people turned expecting a scene. I gave them none. Marlena didn't even notice I was gone. When I reached Beatrix, I didn't ask for a job, didn't plead for mercy. I lifted my glass and tapped hers lightly. "You just won," I said. She studied me for a moment, then raised her own. No words, no smile, just the shared understanding between two women who knew exactly what it cost to be underestimated in a room full of men with monogrammed cufflinks. I drained the glass. After that, I left. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't collect the company swag bag that someone had monogrammed with our logo. I walked out into the cold without a coat phone still in hand, the message still open. When I got home, I sat in the dark for a long time, still dressed for a celebration I'd been cut from. My name was still in the program. My work still filled the slideshow. By morning, I would not exist at Halloween Analytics, but then my phone buzzed again. A new message, unknown number. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office, BR. I didn't sleep. I sat cross-legged on the floor of my apartment until the skyline shifted from charcoal to silver. My laptop blinked at me from the coffee table still open to our team drive. My face stared back from a banner photo, me smiling beside people who never stood up for me. I started deleting, one folder at a time, meeting notes, strategy decks, slide templates with the watermark I designed. I left the marketing folder untouched. Let them keep their branding. Let them choke on it. The company hoodie smelled like peppermint and printer toner. I balled it up, stuffed it into the sink, and lit the match like it owed me an apology. The flame curled fast. Plastic snapped as the embroidery shriveled into smoke. At 9:12 a.m., my phone lit up. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Roanware HQ. BR no emoji, no subject line. Just that. I didn't respond. Not yet. I just stared at the text thumb, hovering pulse steady in my throat. I wasn't sure if I was walking into an opportunity or a warning, but either way I was done being silent. I opened an old file I hadn't touched in months, Codebase Architecture, Marlena's flagship product. I wrote the foundation. I argued for its name. I presented it in New York with a throat full of glass while Marlena collected the praise like it was air. Afterward, she promised me a director title. That was 2 years ago. I watched someone else get that promotion 3 weeks later. It wasn't just about ego, it was theft. By noon, I'd showered, dressed, and packed every paper I'd once cared about into a banker's box I had no intention of bringing. I took a photo of it, though, just to remember what it looked like when you let something go. At 4:30 p.m., I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and tried to smile. The reflection didn't change. It just watched me hollow and still. So I turned out the light. And the next morning, I walked into Roanware wearing the same heels Marlena once said made me look too ambitious for my pay grade. Roanware didn't look like an empire. It looked like a decision. No reception desk, No marble, no framed quotes about innovation, just glass steel and silence that hummed with intent. The elevator deposited me into a hallway without labels. A woman in black slacks met me with a nod and led me through 2 sets of glass doors to a room that felt more like a vault than a meeting space. Beatrix stood at the head of a matte black table, one hand resting lightly on a folder. She didn't ask how I slept. She didn't offer coffee. She just gestured to the seat across from her. "This is Spectre," she said. "Internal unit. Small, private, targeted." The people already seated looked up without smiling. They weren't here to welcome me. They were here to measure me. "Spectre doesn't innovate," Beatrix continued. "It dismantles. Quietly. Permanently." I folded my hands, trying to match her calm. I thought she was about to ask for my resume, my credentials, some elevator pitch of why I mattered. She didn't. "We don't want your history," she said. "We want your memory." She pushed the folder toward me. A single page inside. Legal. Thick with clauses. The title, Non-Disclosure and Tactical Intelligence Agreement. No salary listed, no job title. "You won't be our strategist," she said. "You'll be our scalpel." I didn't move. You know Halloween from the inside out. How it thinks, what it protects, what it's too proud to defend. That's more valuable than any code. I stared at the paper. My name was already typed in. Someone had expected me to say yes. Someone had bet on this moment before I even walked out of the gala. My chest tightened. I thought of Marlena's text, of the product I'd built, of the applause I'd never gotten to hear. I signed. Beatrix nodded once and tapped the table. "Welcome to Spectre." The others said nothing. They just turned their chairs slightly, like I was already one of them. By noon, I was sitting in a war room outlining every fracture point Halawa had been ignoring for years. The thing about building quietly is no one notices where you leave your name. That night, I pulled out an old hard drive I hadn't touched since the last time Marlena told me, "You're too thorough for your own good." The irony tasted sharp. I dug through archived folders, contracts buried under layers of admin PDFs and forgotten compliance templates, and then I found it tucked inside a vendor integration agreement from nearly 3 years ago. Clause 4.3b. Client-specific architecture components developed by strategic lead, C. Fox shall remain the intellectual property of the originator unless superseded by a direct contract amendment. No one ever amended it. I remembered the meeting. Marlena wasn't there. She'd sent me alone, said the contract was beneath her pay grade. I negotiated that clause out of instinct, not foresight. I didn't trust how often she asked me to just sketch it out without credit. So I carved out a line of legal defense signed by a bored third-party rep during a layover and buried it in the paperwork. And now that code, the one I wrote on a red eye with a coffee-stained hoodie and a borrowed charger, still powered Halloween's entire diagnostic integration. Not a product, a spine, and it was still mine. I sat back in the stiff guest chair of my Roanware apartment suite and stared at the screen. Marlena didn't know. Legal probably didn't know. And even if they checked, the language was so technical, so dry, they'd overlook it. But I remembered every word. I emailed the PDF to myself, printed 3 copies, one for Beatrix, one for Spectre's legal vault, and one I folded carefully and slid into my journal between 2 pages I'd once used to sketch out a vision of a product no one had listened to until it was too late. I didn't smile often anymore, but when I saw that clause typed in my own hand, I did. The next morning, Beatrix called for a closed session. She wanted a full report on Halloween's spring rollout. The walls in Spectre's war room weren't covered in art or motivational quotes, just whiteboards, dozens of them mapped with arrows, acronyms, pressure points, and names. Some I recognized, others I'd suspected. And at the center of it all, Halloween's spring rollout plan built on optimism speed and Marlena's need to impress. I walked them through it slowly, methodically. No slides, no buzzwords, just the bones. The AI module isn't stable, I said. They're using synthetic data to inflate efficacy metrics. No external verification, no ethical oversight. It's flashy, but brittle. Beatrix leaned forward. They're skipping beta. They already have, I replied. They want Q2 headlines, not accuracy. We documented everything. The product design language Marlena forced, the client demos scripted to avoid weak spots, the pipeline gaps patched with style sheets and empty promises. It wasn't fraud, not yet, but it was primed to crack. One of Spectre's analysts typed without looking up. If they go live with this, they won't, I said. The next morning, a thought leadership article appeared on a mid-tier tech site. Anonymous author, clean prose, sharp edge. Why data transparency will make or break risk tech in 2025. It didn't mention Halloween. It didn't have to. Every quote, every metric, every veiled warning pointed toward Marlena's ticking clock. By lunchtime, 3 investment analysts had reposted it. One VC I used to pitch to tagged it required reading. Inside Spectre, no one celebrated. They just circled a new date on the rollout calendar, now Marlena's liability. I watched the industry flinch. Just slightly. Just enough. Beatrix slid a hard copy of the article across the table to me. I didn't touch it. You think she's seen it yet? One of the analysts asked. She felt it, I said. That night I stayed late in the war room, not out of pride, out of precision. I went back through every internal memo. I remembered every slide I'd helped create and every shortcut I'd argued against. I wasn't just identifying their flaws, I was timing their collapse. By Friday, Marlena delayed her product launch by 2 weeks. The article dropped on a Thursday morning, buried under euphemisms and false concern. When loyalty fails, how one strategist took insider knowledge too far. No names, of course, just unnamed executives close to the matter, vague references to trade secrets, and one particularly theatrical phrase, borderline espionage. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. By the time the headlines were recycled into Slack threads and email threads and text threads, I wasn't on anymore. The launch for Roanware's Women in Systems. Leadership had already gone live. No drama, no counterattack. Just a clean, sharp rollout with a single photo at the top, me mid-laugh surrounded by 3 junior analysts in sneakers and hoodies. The caption didn't mention Halloween. The message didn't have to. It read, "Building what others only brand." By noon, it was everywhere. I didn't post it. Other people did. Mentors, former classmates. A woman I'd never met tagged me and wrote, "This is what quiet power looks like." Beatrix watched from across the table as the numbers ticked up. Likes, comments, shares. Then she handed me a manila folder. Inside was a printout from a shared company drive. A document I hadn't seen in weeks. Resignation draft. C. Fox created December 5th. Modified never. Signed digitally. I stared at it. Dated a full 4 hours before Marlena's text had arrived at the gala. "You left first?" Beatrix said, her voice steady. She just didn't know it. I ran my fingers along the edge of the paper. I remembered writing it in a hotel room on the road, debating whether to send it or sleep on it. I must have forgotten to delete the draft before I cleared out my devices. Or maybe I hadn't forgotten at all. I looked up and Beatrix nodded once, just once. She didn't say congratulations. She didn't say checkmate. She just turned to the window as if she already knew what would come next. That afternoon, Roanware's legal team drafted a quiet leak to a blog known for uncovering corporate retaliation. The room smelled like fresh paper and fear. We met in a boutique legal suite in Midtown Neutral Ground. No logos, no cameras. Just frosted glass, a silent coffee tray, and enough tension to make the walls sweat. Marlena arrived 2 minutes late, wearing a blazer that couldn't hide the fact that she hadn't slept. She didn't greet anyone, just sat down and stared at the single sheet in front of her. Transition agreement terms, full dissolution of Halawa Analytics under a neutral holding entity. Severance, yes. Title, none. Equity, none. Right to comment, rebrand, or consult, revoked. Beatrix stood behind me like a shadow. She didn't sit. She didn't blink. She let the silence work. "This is a joke," Marlena muttered. Finally, her fingers curling against the page. "You think I'll sign this after everything I built? You didn't build it," I said calmly. "You decorated it with borrowed credit, and then you lit the foundation on fire." Her eyes flashed, but before she could speak again, the door opened. Linda. She stepped in quietly, her hair swept back in a way I hadn't seen since the early days before everything got weaponized. Marlena turned startled. I did too. I asked her to review the reports, Beatrix said. Linda didn't look at Marlena. She looked at me. I read everything she said softly. The clauses, the dates, the system logs. I saw how far she pushed, how far you held. Marlena's voice cracked. "You're siding with her, I'm siding with reality," Linda replied. "This isn't betrayal, this is consequence." Something in Marlena folded. The shoulders that never dropped. She looked at the paper again, but didn't reach for the pen. "I gave you everything," she whispered, "not to me, but to the air between us." "No," I said. "You gave me proximity. I took the rest myself." She signed. Her hand trembled just once. When she stood, she didn't look back. Beatrix opened the door. Marlena stepped through like someone walking off a stage that was already collapsing. Linda stayed behind. She didn't say anything else, just placed her hand on my shoulder once and let it go. By Monday, the press release was ready. By the time the press release hit the wire, the clause had already been triggered. MeshNet, the bridge I built to connect Heloise Diagnostics with its largest insurance clients, was no longer theirs. The moment Marlena signed the transition agreement, the ownership shifted. Roanware absorbed it quietly, cleanly. One line of code, one notarized addendum, and everything that once held Holloway together began to slide apart. Client access stalled, queries failed, compliance dashboards blinked with errors no one could fix. They didn't know why, only that the thing they depended on no longer spoke their language. I watched it happen from the 12th floor where Beatrix's team projected systems data like weather maps. Migration requests flooded in clients I used to brief in person, now asking for demos of the new solution. The one that looked and felt exactly like the tool they used to love. Because it was. Except this time, it belonged to me. Marlena was placed on wellness sabbatical. The kind of polite exile companies use when they don't want to say removed. Her name vanished from the leadership tab on the website. LinkedIn said on hiatus. Slack said nothing at all. But the best part came in a message I didn't send. It was drafted by Beatrix's legal team and sent directly to Marlena's personal inbox just after the asset confirmation was finalized. No signature, no logo, just a subject line, transition complete. And one sentence in the body. Fresh blood always knows where to bleed you. I didn't ask for that line. I didn't need it. But I read it 3 times. Then I closed the email and walked down the corridor past a wall of whiteboards scribbled with projections that already assumed we'd win. Past a conference room where Spectre was preparing the next quiet collapse. Past a team that no longer asked what I used to do, only what I planned next. I stepped into my office and opened a clean draft. The system we'd inherited was still functional, but I wasn't here to inherit. I was here to redesign. They called it a strategic alignment, a soft merger, a repositioning of technical verticals. The language blurred like fogged glass, polished and distant, but the result was simple. Roanware owned what mattered. Heloise Diagnostics Unit folded neatly into our system. Their data funnels restructured their clients briefed. My name wasn't in the press packet. No interviews, no features. Just a bullet point under key transition leads. I didn't correct it. I didn't need a title. I had access. Beatrix handled the public optics with her usual surgical poise. I kept to the back end, refining MeshNet, preparing the quiet launch of something new. The engineers stopped asking for clarification. They started implementing without hesitation. At some point, they stopped calling me Sarin and started calling what I made her system. Somewhere between week 2 and 3, I saw the update. A simple post from the woman who replaced me at Heloise, some bright strategist Marlena, pulled in just before everything burned. Her caption was vague, the way corporate damage control always is, grateful for the journey. On to the next. No comments, no tags, just white space between lines. I stared at it for longer than I meant to. She hadn't written the article that smeared me, hadn't fired me. She'd just accepted the seat I was pushed out of. And now she was gone, carrying the weight of someone else's ego. Guilt flickered soft but sharp. But then I remembered the wine glass shaking in my hand, the coldness of the text, the years I watched my work get repackaged under someone else's name. Justice and vengeance don't look that different when you're standing in the fire they lit. I shut the screen and walked to the boardroom where Spectre was assembling. Beatrix was already inside, arms crossed, nodding at something I couldn't hear. Another company, another flaw exposed. I didn't ask which one. I just stepped in, picked up the marker, and started outlining a new schema. By the time we broke for lunch, our system was already adapting to a different target. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask for applause. Just a low current of attention, the hum of a system running exactly as designed. Lantern was ready. No stage, no live stream. Just 6 clients, a single screen, and the product I'd rewritten line by line. No flair. Just truth, predictive infrastructure, real-time compliance mapping, zero simulation data. It didn't promise magic, it promised clarity, and it delivered. They asked a few questions. Beatrix answered some. I answered the rest. Not performative, not rehearsed, just calm exact. I didn't try to sell them anything. I just showed them what we'd built and what they could rely on. After the session ended, the clients filed out with their assistants and notebooks and unread agendas. One of them paused to shake my hand before leaving. No speech, just a quiet, "Thank you." That was enough. The rest of the team started clearing cables and folding laptops. Beatrix stayed by the far end of the table. She didn't call me forward, didn't summon the room. She just met my eyes and gave me a single nod. I walked to the strategy table, black walnut, long enough to seat 12. I'd been sitting at it for weeks, sketching systems, diagramming launches, revising infrastructure models no one else could hold in their heads. But I hadn't noticed the detail until now. Carved clean into the seat back of the chair I always took just above the curve of the wood was my name, C. Fox. No title, no brass plaque, no spotlight, just permanence. Beatrix didn't say anything. She didn't need to. It wasn't a promotion. It wasn't reward. It was recognition, in code, in contract, in continuity. I ran my fingers over the grain, over the letters etched there, like someone knew I'd outlast the noise. This wasn't vindication. It was inheritance, not of their systems, of what they never understood how to protect. I took my seat, opened my tablet, and pulled up the specs for our next cycle. Lantern wasn't a win. It was a beginning.